Recording is go. What's up? This is Chris.
Kevin Joel.
And we're here talking again about stuff going on in the world of Mormonism.
Mm-hmm.
The thing we have on doc to talk about is the situation. Well, it's a BYU devotional. I have this thing. I have this titled right now, Progressive Devotionals. I don't know if that's going to stay titled that, but there was a devotional at BYU this week that melted my brain. It's called, what's it called?
The Need for Mass Coming Together in This Moment of Crisis.
By William Barber II.
Sounds like a good title. Sounds like,
well,
like, let's come together. And
you sent it to me, and I didn't watch it for a couple of days because I was looking around at so many other things. But I thought from the title it was going to be something that I was going to. I thought it was going to be something I'd agree with and like.
Yeah, likewise.
And
did you hear that?
No.
Okay, good. Sorry, one of my clips that I was just.
And this is a clip. My head kind of melted about the whole entire thing. I did not. I did. It was so Quick covered it, and I watched it before I saw Quick cover it. And Quick was we were just barely talking about how Quick's pretty cordial about it. Although I think he knows, as anybody knows, that this talk is. I tried to comment on the BYU speech. I just said politics. This is politics.
Yeah.
And
well, it seems to me like, and I agree with you. I mean, I saw Quick's video before I saw the full thing. So I don't know if I went into it kind of like with a biased perspective, but I tried to kind of just listen to it and see, is this really, I mean, I always trust Quick. He's pretty honest in what he talks about. Although, and you and I kind of just previously talked about this, that I think he kind of might be trying to be a little bit too charitable.
Yeah.
And because, I think he wants to make it. The one thing I do agree with, I mean, Quick is true to his faith. Quick is true to his integrity. And I think that he does try to approach things charitably, and I appreciate that. And the problem is that there are so many things that are happening here within not within the culture at large, but also specifically within BYU and within the church, where it seems like there are things that are getting slipped into the culture, things that are getting slipped into. I mean,
I'm gonna disagree with you. It's not slipping anymore. It's
jackhammer. Yeah. Okay, jackhammering. And I think this is case in point, because especially after Holland's speech, which ruffled everybody's feathers, but the whole speech was simply about these kind of things, these kind of ideologies are seeping into BYU, and it's undermining the culture that BYU has had. You've talked about this quite a bit with your solo video here just earlier this week, but also I've heard you mention it with Flip even a little bit, and with me too. The thing that the church seems to, there was one comment that really stood out in Quick's commentary. It said, "I'm getting suddenly nostalgic for the times when we were a peculiar people."
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that I think that we're losing sight of who we've been, and I think that that's what Holland's talk was all about. I mean, people get all caught up in what somebody else is saying, about what other people are feeling. They're using his words against him, but his overall message was just about, like, listen, this is BYU. This is who we are. This is what principles we've been founded upon. This is our culture. but it's slipping. And he was saying that we need to defend that. And so when he talked about having a musket in hand and all that stuff, he was talking about defending the culture, defending the history and the roots. I mean, Solzhenitsyn said, if you know, to enslave a people, all you need to do is sever their roots. And I actually said that on one of Quick's videos when he Quick's commentary on Elder Holland's talk. Because that's exactly what's happening. I think that the scripture comes to mind too, like, gosh, I can't remember, in the New Testament somewhere, it talks about don't basically let people despise thy youth. Okay, and what I think that means, I think that you can look at that like as like your foundation, your founding principles. I think that for us means that, you know, that's what a lot of these ideologies are doing. They're coming in and they're making us ashamed of who we've been. You know, they're making us ashamed for standing on our principles. And I think that really that's, after Holland's talk, you know, having somebody like William Barber come and speak, you know, it's just like, okay, here we go, jump right back into politics. And we're not talking about just like left-right conservatism and liberalism. I mean, this is what he's bringing into here is what Quick has mentioned in lots of previous videos. This is liberation theology.
Yeah, it's
Marxist at its core, and you can hear it in a lot of what he's saying. Sorry, I kind of rambled on that one, but
no, you're not rambling at all. I agree with you entirely. I went into it, like I said, I didn't know, I wasn't set up beforehand. I was going into it thinking I was gonna agree with this guy, like he was calling out for, I mean, a little bit in the way that I call out with maybe some ex-Mormons and Mormons of like, we need to come together, because some Christians have been doing it too, saying we need to come together. And I was kind of expecting that, and then a little ways into it, my ears just started bleeding, and I couldn't believe I was hearing this coming out of BYU, man. Like, I was like, Pastor Rashida Tlaib is here preaching
exactly
at BYU, because I mean, it really is. If you're going to parse it out, of course, there's little phrases you can pick up on to say this stuff is pushing towards the critical theory level, but there's also all sorts of, like, you could reel back on that and say it's just highly progressive politics. You can't quite tell for sure. One of the things that Quick glommed onto, thinking that it meant that there's a shared view of Constitution to us, and that word's democracy.
Mm-hmm.
But democracy is that's one of the very tried and true Mott and Bailey terms in those.
Well, that's what I also what I wrote on Quick's was basically the thing that's really like troubling to me is well, and the thing that really gets me about this guy's message and other messages like it is that, I mean, it's really kind of diabolical, I think. And I hate to be so hard on it, but at the same time, it's like, how else can I see it when you're using scripture, you're using I mean, and he comes in and quotes Mosiah 4, these kind of things, and talking about Jesus and stuff like that. And this is what's I think so diabolical about liberation theory or liberation theology, is that it preys on people's current faith and slips in ideas. You know, it really is a philosophies of men mingled with scripture. You know what I mean? And the thing about it is the whole spirit about it that I get, it's all seated in resentment. It's seated in cynicism. It's seated in pride, you know, and I feel that when I hear messages like this, but also when he's talking about, like, let's, you know, we're pushing this in, and we need to have a revolution of morals. And it's like, what? We're talking to BYU here. You know what I mean? That's what trips me out too, is Quick highlighted it, but there was one spot in what Barber was saying, and I wasn't able to cue this one up, but where he talks about that we need to have a moral reset. What? A moral reset?
Yeah, I found a couple. I was just barely listening to it again, and just right at the beginning, he said some other words like what was it? New possibilities. You know, it's all these like new imagine, reset, what's he's got his own book called like the third reconstruction or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And
it's not like old school
he
revolutionary talk, but it's kind of like it's a neo-Marxist flavor.
He talks past the sale on a lot of stuff. Like he presupposes that everybody's already in agreement with him that there's systemic racism, that we've got to redistribute the money. The money's there's too many rich people, and I think one of the things that's always funny is they say like 30% of people are poor. You kind of go, I mean, that makes sense in like a world where things are distributed. You know what I mean?
Let's make 100%.
Yeah, like it's one of those things that don't make any sense to me. He mentioned trickle down theory. I have this quote. It's funny because I was just listening to Thomas Sowell this week, and I did notice Thomas Sowell being brought up on a few of them.
Yeah, on multiple, on Quick's thread, and on BYU speeches thread.
But most of them were talking about Thomas Sowell mentioning minimum wage and his work on minimum wage and his work on how these redistribution methods are what destroyed families and are what ruined communities. But let me just show this, because I didn't see anybody mention trickle down theory, that this guy talked past the sale of just acting like trickle down theories something worth just everybody just agrees upon is a problem.
Right.
Segment 3, trickle down and millionaires. Now, the attack on this theory, which has been tested and shown to work, where does this phrase trickle down come from?
Oh, I don't know. It was as far back as the Roosevelt administration. There is absolutely, it is an incredible thing. There is a non-existent theory that is constantly being attacked. Some years ago in my newspaper column, I challenged anybody to cite any economist outside of an insane asylum who had ever made that argument. Nobody ever came up with a single person.
So when Barack Obama says in this past July, quote, "We were told that prosperity..."
Ask him who told him.
Nobody told him.
No
economist has ever held that. No politician has ever said it.
I don't know of anybody who's ever said it. In fact, when I put this out, and I went out a nationally syndicated column, various people wrote me and said, "Well, so-and-so said that, so-and-so said it." But find me the person who said it. I don't want to hear how A said that B said it. Find me B and show me where he said it. And that was years ago. Not one example has been offered.
All right. So trickle-down economics is not a political theory. It is a political, I beg your pardon, it's not an economic theory. It is a political hack phrase used.
It's a caricature. In other words, the argument really is not that you should put more money in the hands of the wealthy. It's also part of a zero-sum conception of the economy.
So that's kind of just somebody speaking about trickle-down theory, just unironically like that, talking past the sale. Mm-hmm. That kind of makes my ears buzz. But where my antennas first started shooting up is where he started talking about abundance. Actually, that he said he was saying that we're just in a world of total overabundance, and some people are just hoarding that abundance and that sort of thing. And that goes a little bit against the zero sum thing, but at the same time, that it's kind of talking out of both sides of the mouth at the same time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like it's zero sum, but these guys have it all. But at the same time too, there's enough in this world that if all we did was redistribute forever, we would all just live in paradise for forever. There's something strange to me, because like all these years, people used to get mad at General Conference, like ex-Mormons, that they kind of wouldn't talk about political things, you know what I mean, very much. And the idea of that always was, well, you're supposed to be telling us stuff that's going to matter to us right now. It's going to matter to our dollars right now. It's going to matter to our life right now. at some point I kind of had like a realization of myself that like if these people are actually pastors or God thinkers or soul thinkers, why would they think about like these physical, like so much of they say of Marxism is it's materialist, and this whole entire political talk was materialist, you know.
Yeah.
There's so much talk too about like maybe it's unfair. There's not fair distribution around, but at the same time too, one of the major things that helped me wrap my mind around some things in the Bible and in religious speaking is the concept of charity, and the concept of when you are really being a person who is actually giving in the spirit of charity, and how taxation and redistribution is not that. And so this long-winded, I call it long-winded diatribe, kind of performative diatribe about politics, doesn't seem pastor realm to me, except for the couple times that he brought up scripture. And then, I mean, it definitely seems pastor how he gets kind of riled up into the what a day.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, I actually have a little bit of an affinity for like the Baptist preacher, style, just because I served a mission in South Carolina, and those were a lot of the people that I actually got to meet with, and so I actually like this. I like that style, and he definitely is a guy who knows how to work a room. That's for sure. But the problem is, in the name of what? Do you know what I mean? It's like when you're using, you pointed it out pretty clearly, the difference between, having something taken from you and you giving it voluntarily is a stark contrast. What does it do for the souls of people to take something away from them versus inspire them to give it of their own free will?
Yeah. And back on like the little buzzwords to me, or even like the way he uses democracy. I mean, one of the reasons democracy is used by the socialist types is like they're a little bit trying to argue against the republic in a bit of a way. Like we need to make this whole entire thing down to just majority rules across the board, across everywhere. And our republic isn't set up that way. And one of the main things
there's
these
not.
Go ahead.
There's not a whole lot of virtue in mob rule.
That's the argument. The argument is they're arguing for the mob rule. They really are. That's really kind of any sort of a socialist take on the word democracy. When they start talking about common good and democracy, that whenever they use it, they're using a Mott and Bailey term.
But it is. The whole speech is Mott and Bailey going back and forth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's a quote. I think it's. Oh, I don't know who exactly said, but it says communism is the only way to bring true democracy, and then will wither away.
Yeah.
And that's not to throw shade on the concept entirely on the concept of democracy. I mean, I think that's why our founding fathers are pretty brilliant guys.
That's why we have a democrat. It's a democratic republic. You know what I mean? It's a constitutional republic with democracy within it. Of course, it's like you got to have some checks and balances. That's the point.
If people want good breakdown, look up New Discourses, the woke manipulation of the word democracy. There's a YouTube video on it. That one's only an hour long. You got any clips from this fella?
Yeah. So I wanted to highlight and just kind of showing. I mean, this is kind of how you whip people into action, okay, or praxis, right? Here's your praxis right here.
This is at BYU. This is at BYU.
Can you see my video here?
I don't even think there's anything like. Well, there's surely there's that much at University of Utah.
Okay.
This is at BYU.
Yeah, it's nutty, man. Like, and I was never a BYU, like, I didn't grow up a BYU fan, really. I went to the University of Utah. But
Me too.
you know, it's. But I always looked at BYU as being a church school, which is what it is. It's a private church school. Anyway, it's nutty. So I'm gonna throw this on real quick.
It breaks my brain. No matter, I mean, I already known it's there. I did know it was there. Even this I've known for a day or two about, and I'm still, I literally feel like I'm sitting here in like a stunned state. Like, still, I really am.
Well, here we go. We're gonna shock your system here and get you out of being stunned. So here we go.
Time has come, my brothers and sisters, for us to be the moral defibrillators of our time. You know what a defibrillator is, don't you? In a hospital, when somebody has a bad heart, somebody with a good heart has to call a code. And when they call a code, the team brings a defibrillator. And with that defibrillator, they shock the bad heart. And when they shock the bad heart, it has the power to revive the bad heart back to life. Well, in society, in every generation, we need moral defibrillators. Brigham Young University, we need some moral defibrillators. This is the only thing. This is the only thing that has ever changed the nation. It's time for the remnant to shock the conscience of this nation.
Notice what he says, man. Like he says that this is the only thing that changes civilization is for you to be an activist. Because you got to get in there and shock the system. And notice also, like this, his words. He's got his words played out very carefully. What does he say? He said a person with a bad heart needs somebody with a good heart to come in and shock their system in a hospital. That's you know. So it's like we're saying that if you're not down with this, you don't got a good heart, man.
Do you think there's some sort of level to it that he's that where he goes to BYU, we need a defibrillator, like he's trying to say BYU, you need a defibrillator, you know?
No, I think that he's trying to activate people. I think he's trying to turn. I mean, that's what he's saying, that you need to be a defibrillator. You in the student.
So you should be the
student body, or you in the faculty need to be the activist to change, because that's what his whole thing. And I mean, he's saying this in the name of.
He's not talking about looking at their heart. He's talking about becoming a machine, an activist.
Well, yeah, and all this really is boiling down to in context. He's talking about people who are poor. He's talking about all that stuff. So it's like it's going back to almost a vulgar Marxism, of economics. He's
that's what I would have said from the start too. Is like it seems vulgar, like vulgar Marxism, which means it's not fully like
but he does, that
full critical theory.
No, but he does talk about the system be I don't know if he used the term systemic racism, but he definitely used what the white supremacy and
but that's some of the stuff too, is like the way he talks about it.
This is a special blend here of vulgar and neo-Marxism.
Yeah. And at some level too, you could say his politics might seem more just like on the far end progressive liberalism.
Yeah,
you can't tell exactly for sure.
Well, and that's where that's the Mott and Bailey plays. You know what I mean? He's going back to kind of more standard and progressive, and then it's interesting because he jumps around as far as like the positions he's taking are either going to be one from, he's softening the blow with religious speak, you
and I watching this thing, we're left kind of confused, but we're never really kind of confused when stuff's just moving towards far leftistness, that it's all going in one direction, one way or the other. But is he full liberal progressive? Is he vulgar Marxist? Is he cultural Marxist? He's got little dashes of it all in there. Why are we asking these three things for somebody who's giving a religious devotional at BYU?
That's it. Well, that's the thing, is that this is, again, like taking this into context from BYU. This is a devotional. Historically, with devotionals, they shut down campus. It's supposed to be like, this is where we go to become spiritually fed.
Yeah. Amazing.
But let's listen to what he says right here.
This is the only thing that has ever changed the nation. It's time for the remnant to shock the conscience of this nation. And today, only a revolution of the heart can save and revive this democracy and move us toward a beloved community. Because some issues, my brothers and sisters, are not left versus right or Democrat versus Republican, but it's right versus wrong. When we fight to secure labor policies and anti-poverty policies, we are reviving the heart of this democracy. When we develop tax policies, they no longer funnel all of our prosperity.
See, then he just jumps over, talks about tax policies.
Yeah, so the democracy,
crap, dude.
anti-poverty policies, labor policies. This is how we revive our democracy.
Yeah, and
I'm telling
no,
this is
not
Martin
how.
Bailey.
Not just totally. And he's doing these different Martin Baileys all over the place, because then he goes back and he's like, we need a revolution of the heart. That what a revolution of the heart. I mean, what the crap? You know what I mean? It's like, and then he says, and he plays this other tactic throughout the whole talk too. He's like, I'm not a conservative. I'm not a liberal. Or I think he says, I am a conservative and I am a liberal. And so it's like there's a lot of confusion. Like we're both totally confused listening to this guy. Like what the, but I mean, it's I don't know. It's kind of astounding.
Well, I mean, there's so much about how John Larson was speaking in those videos that are just kind of all over the place, and you kind of try to reel it in and say, look at the stuff he's saying, because a lot of what they're saying is the smoke and mirrors. Well, I'm not a liberal. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a conservative. Marxism. And there's. I'm fully aware when I go saying that there's all sorts of people who would say, "Oh gosh, you're seeing Marxism and everything. You guys are doing the pareidolia of that you're picking it out of everything." No. These guys are all the modern day, current day leftist and far left politics. All embraces the stuff when the doors are closed. They're not. They'll only like do it to try to gaslight you, to upset you, to make you feel like you're crazy. But
yeah,
there's like a whole level of me, and once or twice I've met him, like we just said in the last episode. Like Flip knows some commies, and we met and hung out, and I played guitar with some commies who call themselves commies and even dress like commies. I have some sort of level of respect for the people who just admit it. You know what I mean? Because so many other people they're really trying. They know that they have to do it to try to convert people in the middle.
Well, yeah, because that's right. That's exactly right. He's not taking any stance. He's trying to be identifiable with a variety of people, whoever on the political spectrum, right? And so he's playing. I don't take sides, but yet at the same time he's jamming leftist politics down your throat.
And like I said, he talks past the cell. I guarantee you the reason you didn't hear systemic racism is because he said it in like a talk past the cell way, that it's just like it slipped by, like it's already accepted that's something we all agree upon. And you'd have to like stop and listen 3 times to catch all the different little things that he slips in. But like I said, it's a jackhammer. But
yeah.
But talking past the cell drives me nuts with a lot of that stuff. Like talking past the cell, that trickle down theory is a problem. He's not doing what we're doing and trying to stop and say, hey, this is the claim. This is the claim, right? That he's talking past that claim. So it's like if we came into this podcast like, Kevin, what are we going to do with these Marxist professors? You know what I mean? We're spending more time saying, hey, we're going to try to point out that he's being, he's Marxist.
Pretty much it. And I don't know why people in the church, or even ex-Mormons and stuff like that, because obviously we all kind of have been raised with these ideas, right? I mean, no matter what you think, but I mean, I've studied enough of religions to know that that we have probably sort of the clearest fundamental doctrine of individual sovereignty. You know, when you're talking about the doctrine of the premortal existence and the war in heaven, we were all, I mean, it's pretty clear that Christ was on the side of, no, I understand there's going to be plenty of, you guys are going to be up against the possibility of possible failure, but we have to do it this way because you got to have your own, you have to have your own free agency. Well, and the doctrine of Lucifer was that we're all going to succeed. Nobody's going to fail. You know what I mean? I mean, if it's not pretty clear that like anything that's Marxist is pretty much totally juxtaposed to everything that is LDS and you know, doctrine.
Yeah, and the fact, I think this kind of speaks for itself in the sense that we're making the case that this stuff is trying to pry itself into everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a case for itself. This is BYU, and here they are. And Quick's entire video on this was, I think we need to have some opposing opinions on this, but there are no opposing opinions on this at BYU. Like you would think that at BYU that this would be the one that they let slip in to give an opposing view. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But Quick is saying that no, it's only this at that Mormon university. It's so obvious, like it's so obvious that BYU has gone through a major shift and a major change and a major thing that happened through the same type of activistic entryism. It's so obvious. If you've been alive for the past 20 years, you should be brain boggled that this is how BYU is now. And it's making our case for us. But at the same time, to now be sitting here saying, hey, far left progressive politics are going to take over institutions while we're sitting here staring at it, that I feel just as crazy, saying like we're just standing here saying the sky is blue and we still have to make a case for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's all Mott and Bailey. It's all Trojan horse, you know, type of stuff.
Spreading like a virus.
And I mean,
as they call themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I get the sense when I read through some of the comments with Quick that he gets pretty disheartened about this. He was, you know, because he went to BYU. His family went to BYU, big BYU fans and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, even he himself, I saw it somewhere, him saying that he didn't see that this kind of thing is going to slow down or really change. Even, you know, though Elder Holland came out, and I mean, Holland came under a lot of scrutiny for making a stand. You know what I mean? I see that there is a big move to push, and it's not just this is a microcosm in all of America. This is happening in the West at large, that we are being severed from our roots. We are being made to be ashamed of who we are. I mean, you know, And the crazy thing about it is the West as a whole was responsible by and large for the ending of slavery, of the changing of human rights and things like that, women voting. And I mean, what was one of the first states to allow women to vote, Chris? Utah.
I think it was the first.
I think it was the first too. So it's like, you know.
It's so weird to me. And part of it is, as we've talked so much about how it parasitizes good people. I never say that word quite right, but watching that clip, and you can see in the audience that it does kind of look like a general conference audience, you know what I mean? And they've got like the suits and they start clapping and he gets them to stand at the end and all that sort of stuff. And it's just so mind melting to me. But yeah, it's been what's called the long march to the institutions, and even any institution, even BYU, even any church institution is susceptible to it. And that's from Rudy Deutschke. He was an activist, and that's going back to Gramsci again. All goes back to Gramsci. I was watching this other video it was from 4 years ago, but it was Anthony Fantano. Do you know who that is?
Mm-mm.
He's just like a YouTube music critic guy, and he was critiquing Paul Joseph Watson, talking about cultural Marxism. And then he got into this whole performative thing of like, you're a crazy conspiracist. What are the frogs going to be gay again, or something like that? And at some point, that game's going to stop working on people. I mean, it's been exposed and put out enough. I mean, the gaslighting on that, but maybe still not. They still say they'll still say, hey, talking about this Marxism stuff is conspiracy stuff. What other conspiracies you buy into?
The whole term, I mean, of calling something conspiracy is probably the most overused gaslighting technique these days.
Stop thinking about it. Stop looking at a thing. Stop thinking about a thing. You're a crazy person. I've got this whole other thing, but I think it'd be good for another video. But it maybe be good here. I want to talk about anti-theism or anti-Mormonism, and one of the things I want to say about it is so much of I'll just tease it for the future, but it might make sense here too. John DeLynn very frequently for Mormon Stories has been saying, I'm not an anti-Mormon, and where he obviously is an anti-Mormon in the traditional sense where we're talking about these Mormons are so terrible. But I want to get into the real sense of anti-theism and anti-Mormonism, which is inversion. And the inversion
just real quick, I don't know, I can't find it anywhere like defined. But like when you look in context of like the Book of Mormon, the prefix anti meant in the likeness of.
Yep.
Right.
Perfect.
And just like anti-Nephi Lehi's, they're trying to be like Nephi and Lehi, right? And even that brings a depth to the idea of anti-Christ, where it's not necessarily just trying to be going completely against. It's actually taking a mirror image of
and
an inverse.
We will be the replacement.
Exactly.
We will be the reimagined. We will
Exactly.
be the new thing that takes the place of the other thing.
Right.
And I have a bunch of different stuff on that too. I would argue John DeLynn is an anti-Mormon in that sense. He wants to be the replacement. He wants, and right. I can show proofs and arguments for that. And
well, that's pretty much every video he puts out. I mean, yeah. I haven't watched certainly not as much as you have, but I mean that's the sense I always get.
Well, I would say that extends beyond to all of the anti-theism world of the atheism world, that when they start getting into these highly moralistic, commie level statism type things, they are trying to be the anti-theism in this sense, not in the anti-theism of you should go away and burn and disappear. It is we should be the replacement and the better, right, new, pure moral version. We should do that. You got a lot of time today or no?
I
think that is a separate podcast, but I could do it right now, but I could also do it another time.
100%.
Anything else?
No, I just do see the parallels. I think about this a lot when it comes to like Marxism and stuff like that. Parallels of the pre-war, premortal existence, and how because the thing about it is I sit there and I wonder, okay, if doctrinally speaking, every person that's lived on this planet, according to LDS doctrine, is they chose their first estate. They chose to follow Jesus. Okay, 1/3 of the host of heaven followed Satan, right? Well, how in the world we have it painted so black and white oftentimes. I think we're taught that way, but I think that how is it that he was able to take 1/3 of the host of heaven? By the way, how many people were killed in Russia under Stalin and under the communist rule? 1/3 of their population. 1/3 of the population. And I think that statistic is actually pretty close for China too, under Mao. Look that up. If somebody has a correction for me.
Well, the problem is they're commie nations and they don't give you proper good numbers.
Right. I just think that it's an interesting parallel. You know what I mean? But I sit there and I think about how in the world was he able to convince 1/3 of God's kids? And I'll tell you how. That he had to play on their heartstrings. And that's exactly what's going on in our culture right now. It's like, you don't want to be one of those like heartless, people who makes other people suffer, do ya? That's exactly the sneering attitude that's behind all of that. That's not what true charity is.
Yeah. This was a good podcast, and I think he has a book out of the numbers on the gulags, and it's been hard. It's been difficult to get the numbers on that sort of stuff. But I mean, it talks about how those people got killed, and then if another good episode. Jonathan Streeter's been talking with somebody about the Cultural Revolution, but one of his recent episodes, I wish I had it right up here, is this right here. If you want, he took some time to put it, but if you want a heartbreaker, a kid who got radicalized into being part of his own mother's assassination. But even if there is good stuff on the Cultural Revolution, it's so subtitled, it's kind of hard to watch in China. But yeah, you're right. It is there is a parallel. I think it's safe to say it's a third. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's close, but I just think that that's pretty interesting. I think people need to be aware of that. And I think that, one of the things that is one of the reasons why I've stayed within the church and stuff like that. Cause I individual sovereignty, man. I mean, and inspiring people to, of their own. That's the thing. I mean, Christ's message is for each individual person. And it talks about how, Christ changes people from the inside out, not from the outside in. And liberation theology is all about the outside in, you know what I mean? And I looked into a little bit more of that. Maybe we can talk a little bit about this if you want to keep going. But like, I didn't really look, I'm not like a real student of Marxism and all that stuff, but I try to learn more and more. But like the roots of liberation theology, do they come out? I saw some kid was talking about like the basically a theology which is kind of almost anti-theist, or I don't even know. It just seems like a perversion of Christianity, really. That it comes out of like the death of God, like Nietzsche, and like people like this kid. I watched this kid's video, and he was talking about how like as we went to the moon and we saw that God wasn't there, people's faith was like undermined or something like that, and so instead of like, oh, God's really not really there, and so we're going to just take the message of the gospel and use it in a Marxist direction. Is that kind of where liberation theology comes from?
Well, I mean, I don't think they'd say it so blatantly. Maybe somebody down the line did, but they definitely try to. It initially came out of Catholicism, and it came out of Latin America.
Yeah, I know that too.
And but then that sort of got picked up by some Southern Christian churches like James Cone and those types of guys. I forget the guy's name, but there is a Peruvian philosopher, Gustavo Gutierrez, but no, there's a guy named Carana or something like that. He's out of Brazil, and that guy is actually, I mean, yeah, he's a full on Marxist, and the stuff informed in a lot of ways. It informed. Yes, they are like fully embracing of Marxism, and so if you're fully embracing of Marxism, I mean that inherently in itself kind of says. I don't know if anybody ever wrote and said we embrace the entire concept of the materialism of Marxism, but it does. As soon as God goes, all your politics become your religion. And as you can see in these, if you can see in all these new type of like far left preachers, they're 100% focused on the material world.
Right.
But I'll go so far as to say, that, yeah, you're right. I bet you somebody did write that. So I just can't think of it off the top of my head if there
Right.
was somebody.
I'll look a little bit more into it. Maybe we can, if it comes up in the future, we can kind of talk a little bit about it. But I do think that this is, and Quick's pointed it out, because I mean he kind of helped me see it, is that that's what's being injected into LDS culture right now.
Well, it's being injected into all culture. I mean, there's
Exactly.
not a church in the world that doesn't have some sort
I mean, look at the Southern Baptist, convention. They're, I drove by the Methodist Church downtown Salt Lake the other day and just saw some of the political flags that they're flying and stuff like that, and it's getting in everywhere.
Well, I was just joking with Flip yesterday. We know this guy, and there's always this concept in Marxism called entryism, that
Right.
that you put somebody moving into the party or into the religion or something like that, who is going to pretend to be a complete true believer of what the thing they're getting into is, and then they're going to slowly start spreading the Marxism into it. And if liberation theology is that, I mean, obviously it is. The problem is I don't know if anybody ever admitted, like, outwardly that was their goal, even though anytime you see entryism, you can guess that was their goal, and that's what they did. And it's for sure happening in religion all over the place. And it's back when I was at the Midnight Mormons, I mean, it was one of the things I was warning about from the start, is that they will pretend to be, they don't want to abolish and disappear Christ. They want to take over Christ. And I'm going to tell you this straight up. I've debated with a lot of people online over the years about critical theory stuff just directly. And most times, even somebody who like spouts their degree out or something like that, most times they don't know much about anything. And one of the hardest persons I've had to debate is a real deal believing Mormon. I think you might know him too. He's on like one of the websites we're both on. And he's one of the only ones who's read all the stuff and then still believes it and still wants to move it in and work it in. And I would say he's even somebody who is a entryist on that website that we're in, because that website isn't supposed to be a commie website. But almost in the past 5-6 years, man, I'm telling you, like if you got onto any sort of like Facebook page, there was somebody in there who, you don't know how that one person got in there, and then they before long start dominating all the posts,
right?
And they were the commie. You know what I mean? They were like, I was on this like Eric Weinstein page, right? And before long, the whole entire Eric Weinstein page was commie posts, and by one guy, and it's just that same thing on a smaller level. And Flip and I were talking about entryism yesterday, about how feminists do it. And it is the same sort of a methodology used of any sort of a radical changer, a defibrillator, as we might call them.
Yeah.
They're going to infiltrate into something, pretend like they're in line and believe the thing. And then you can even say there's all sorts of things called rhinos that do that sort of deal too. But I brought it up in one of the other podcasts about John Larson getting into talking about how it's just pathetic that these Mormons think they see that their politics in the Bible. And I said my zing, which is, guess what, comrade? Guess what else ain't in there? Marxism ain't in there either. But where I do think he's wrong and everybody else is right is that the Bible's talking about different godly level precepts rather than politics, and your deeper axioms play into your politics, of course.
Right.
And what you're talking about there is, I do believe all the concepts of sovereignty are. So if you're sitting there saying the Bible doesn't say nothing about nationality and having guns, you dum-dums, I would say there's an axiomatic precept behind that, which is sovereignty. But you could also say the same thing maybe with Marxism, is that there's an axiomatic precept that you're supposed to care for the poor. But I think Marxism inverts that, because it's not, well, there's always the issue that Orwell brings up too, that we've talked about, that in The Road to Wigan Pier, where he talks about, the Marxists aren't really out to help the poor. They're just out to screw over the rich.
Right. Yeah.
But I think those deeper precepts that maybe do come out in ways that seem nationalistic or gun-toting or whatever, I think there are those deeper precepts do have appearances, like you said, not just an appearance. It's kind of one of the centers of the whole entire thing, and I think it's one of the centers of the real Constitution, not democracy. The Constitution is the deeper precepts of your fundamental human rights. Your sovereignty. Yep. Not that a democracy can come along and rob you of your sovereignty because they've voted so.
Right.
There's so much sand in the eyes. It's all nothing is coming, but it's thrown. It's got the wolf is running around, but the wolf wasn't ever just like going to try to attack and bite us. All it did is it had like a bag of sand, and it was just throwing sand in everybody's eyes. That's all it's doing.
Yep.
But I want to do a longer thing on that whole concept of anti-theism.
Yeah, I'd love to, man. I think that's one that I've thought about too. We can kind of get into a lot of stuff with that conversation. I mean, it really does give you kind of like an insight into the whole idea of what is Antichrist. You know what I mean? It's not just Marilyn Manson, you know what I mean, and that kind of stuff, and Ozzy and all that kind of stuff. it's not nothing really in the same, but yet at the same time, I mean, the propaganda, of course, but
so like the Flip and I did a post just kind of going back and talking crap on the whole new atheism movement. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that happened to it is it fell apart because it moved into atheism plus. And what at that time frame there used to be an argument of, should you be an atheist or an anti-theist? Should you be an atheist or an anti-theist? And in came atheism plus and just obliterated it all.
Yeah, well, it sounds like I definitely think that'll be a good conversation.
Yeah.
So,
what about this dude?
I didn't really want to get into this too much, but again, maybe with just another topic of conversation. How I see it's so interesting how like I see, you mentioned it on your solo video, and I wasn't able to crack my can of A&W root beer here, but but James Lindsay, he's an atheist, and he's not shy about talking about it, but like the whole his whole relationship with Michael O'Fallon, it's pretty awesome, I think, how they're able to do that, and but he him pushing, listen, stay true. You got to have these conversations, and we got to come together.
Yeah, for sure. And as you see, as it goes on and it happens, I think it'd be interesting to kind of look at like what happened with Christopher Hitchens going around with Doug Wilson all the way back, because people kind of don't remember that little stint. But even James Lindsay, as he goes talking and hanging out with people, he just came out with a podcast this week arguing pretty directly that theology should be back in school. And
I mean, inverted world, totally. You got a atheist talking about, hey, we need to have religion in schools. I mean, man, it's wild.
Yep, because people, even atheists, are starting to realize and notice that, and I'll say, like, somewhere down at the end of that, some of them might start flipping back. Actually, it's already been happening. Jonathan Pageau kind of always jokes about it too, that he does know a lot of atheists who went back. Well, I mean, I think Carrie Smith is one of them from Unsafe Space, but
I think even categorize Peterson in there too.
Yeah, but somewhere down the line, like even all the atheists, what they see and notice is that the bad inverted version is way worse than the original version, of religion. And maybe the original version, like say the whole atheism world is real, maybe the original concept of religion was a thing that was there to protect from it becoming the opposite of it. You know what I mean? And maybe that's true, maybe it's not, or maybe it is just maybe it is all true, and that things weren't supposed to get turned upside down, and that we're really in a bigger yin-yang experiential world that is a bit more harder to comprehend than any one of us galaxy brains can either. I was reading some analytic philosophy, and they're ones that like the maybe like enlightenment minded people might like, you know what I mean? They're the ones who are like pro logical positivism, pro, you know, and you start reading that and you get down in the weeds of it, and it starts getting so weird too. And you realize like they kind of start trying to put math to words and write out these mathematical equations to the words and all sorts of stuff. And like at some moment you stop and go, anytime we go around trying to explain everything, it gets strangely weird and strangely religious, and it strangely falls apart. And if you go back to like Gödel's in math, he found out that there's an incompleteness theorem, that he found out you can't find true axioms in math. And I just contend, like with any sort of atheist, you can hold on to like the whole world of there is just the logical positivism of the world, but you go down the road of any sort of that stuff, go down hard, it gets weird. That's all there is to it. And we're not going to figure it out with our great big autistic brains, but there might be some super mega supersonic supercomputer in the future that will get a hold of all of it, and then in a utilitarian fashion it will decide, do a democratization, because that's one of the concepts that I've argued. Oh gosh, man, we should, anytime we get a chance to stop, we should stop, because the whole concept of Sam Harris trying to come up with his own morality, it gets into trying to come up with this concept of meta versions of well-being, and then those meta versions of like some sort of democratized well-being is what you'd impose upon the people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you have to like stop and think about, you guys want to impose a morality, a new morality on the world that doesn't have any of the art in it, that doesn't have any of like the esoteric explanations or the ritual or any of that stuff. It just has cold hard explanations that we've democratically figured out what's right, and we figured it out from metadata, and now this is all our new morality. Like, you're not going to land on something that's going to make everybody happy. You're going to cause as much fights, if not more fights than ever, you know.
Yep.
And
Ah, man. But that's like the inevitable like end game of where we're heading, man.
well, I mean, I think that's back to what the pragmatists are right about, or the Darwinistic end of it, if you want to call it Darwinistic. I mean, I even think you can get outside of calling it exactly that, because I think Pajau does. But it's reality bats last. Reality bats last. And getting some sort of super mega brain giant entity on top of everything that's going to fix everything
Elon Musk
is not reality. It's not reality. I don't care how science you scream at the moon. Science, you know, and that's their little prayer, you know, science, and no, reality will bat last. You'll fail, and people will die. Kevin and I have talked about this so many different times that like we aren't worried that the Marxists are going to win in the end. We're just worried they're going to win in the middle. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
They're just going to kill a bunch of us off in the meantime. You know what I mean? That's all it is. They're not going to win in the end. Reality bats last.
If history is any predictor of the future, we're in trouble now.
Yeah, the question is just did I get put into a gulag in the middle? You know what I mean? But you guys aren't going to win in the long run.
Yeah, I mean,
I just really hope to dodge the gulag until we get to the other side of it. But there's something about too the concept of religious thinking and thinking of aiming for goods that aren't of this world. That is such a way of avoiding this type of nuttiness, and the Marxists would give a critique that it's like that's also a way of making you stop and not thinking about the politics of your life, of how you're being oppressed. I go back to the general conference and all those sorts of stuff that I used to be somebody who would also complain about and say, why didn't you talk about the politics? Why didn't you talk about the, I don't know what, the war or something like that, you know? And they talked about your soul. And ex-Mormons used to say, they talked about something that, you know, like you shouldn't watch rated R movies. There's a war going on. Well, all this time later, that seems pretty wise to me. You know,
it's the foundation, man. It's the foundation. And I mean, it's, to me, you know, one of the things where I felt like President Nelson was totally on point this last general conference was he talked a lot about that, about, you know, making sure you have your moral foundation. You know, this crap with Barber, we need to have a moral revolution, or like talking about like changing out our foundations. Like, we don't need that. We just need to have people go back to the real reason. You're right. It is all about faith. It's all about, do you really have faith in that? You know, because because there's something about having that faith that like truly inspires people to motivate in the most pure ways to be able to act for good in the world.
yeah, and that's another thing I wanted to talk a lot about too, is action, which I guess Peterson does, but I mean, I didn't go farther with it. Is like the action is really all that matters, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think Peterson would use that.
Some people would act it out.
Yeah,
he always talks about act it out. You know what I mean?
And some people would call it like a cop out. I don't think it was a cop out. I mean,
when you know, too, when he's posed with the question, do you believe in God? Like, I can't think of like a more profound answer to say I act as if God exists. I mean, because really, I think he's just being completely honest. And I think, you know, when you hear his talks about like, do I believe in God, and he gets emotional about it, he's like, I don't even think we grasp the idea of like what that actually really means. If you really truly believe in God, then you're gonna keep his commandments. And you know what? I'm just, and this is where I feel humbled, because it's like I'm not completely obedient about everything all the time. You know what I mean? And I don't think anybody is, obviously, you know what I mean? But the point is like, you know, I think that is one of the most profound answers that I've heard, is I act as if God exists, because actions speak much louder than words do.
And what one of his big points is, and I think it's totally true, is that so frequently, without knowing it, atheists go and act as if he does too.
So fun living in the inverted clown world.
That's what it is, man. It is inverted. Well, it's also kind of like a weird, strange thing that I do think kind of BYU ran off on its own track. I don't think BYU as an institution is under the full control of the church at this point anymore, you know?
No, I mean, there's a lot of comments in there saying that, no, BYU is kind of in, you know, it does have its own autonomy to act how it wants to act, but it's been aligning itself with academia for the last 10 years.
Well, but there was that entryism and that ratcheting in academia too. Academia is only far left right now because it was taken over, and it was taken over by what we've been trying to tell people about. Right. I feel crazy at this point saying that we need to even tell people about it. It should be obvious.
Which is so weird, because BYU did such a good job for so many years at like really trying to like bring cultures in and be a cultural melting pot. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they did so good with that for so long, you know, and now it's like it's all getting homogenized now.
It's painful to watch. You know, it's so weird to me. It's so weird. It's so weird.
Well, and to not give credit really where the credit's due, that's the thing that kind of pissed me off too about this talk, is that it's like you're talking to an organization and you're talking to members of a church that you know have a pretty good track record of actually doing pretty good things in the world and helping lift the poor up, have a diverse you know campus and all that kind of stuff. And you're talking about it like this is all white supremacy. It's like it's so reductionistic, man. It just breaks my brain too.
I would going all the way back to the start where you said like if BYU was just doing this, like letting this guy come talk as like an open environment where somebody can come talk and that you knew what was behind it was kind of their more traditional way of being. But the problem is that you know that institution is more showing that they're aligned with this than showing that they're being open to other people.
Well, I was talking to a guy who's in my ward who I talk to him every morning at the gym, right? And he's kind of a little bit more of a liberal, even progressive Mormon, and I like him. He's great. There's like so much great about him. But we were actually talking about this morning, and he's like, well, to be fair, you know, you could like, and he kind of threw Benson back, and I'm like, well, but Benson was 30, 40 years ago, man. It's like we're in a different time right now, and it's like if you're gonna do it, fine, do it, but like at least, you know, don't do it as a devotional. First of all, bring him on, you know, and just have him be what he is, and that's you know where I agree with you. It's like, listen, you know, this guy he's all over the place. You know, he's claiming all sorts of different things of who he is. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a I'm not a liberal. I'm not a conservative, or I am a conservative. I am a liberal. It's like, well, that's fine. I understand. We all kind of have, you know, I mean, I kind of identify with that a little bit myself because I feel like I have both liberal and conservative tendencies, which I think most people do, especially in the middle. But like, I don't know, but I see it. You and I can see it pretty clearly because we've kind of been studying this stuff for a while. You know, it's like you're just trying to activate people. That's it. That's what this is all about. It's about activating people towards something else. But like, you know, don't do it as a devotional, BYU. If you're going to bring somebody political on, make sure that you do it, you know, bring somebody left and then bring somebody to counterbalance it. Yeah.
Well, there's something, and we should have gone back on it again because it was in our very first video that I never put out of the Jonathan Haidt video about the difference between truth and activism. Mm-hmm. And you're exactly right that there's something about the people who want to just turn people into activists without thinking, just to go out and start being activists. That they know on some sort of level that becoming an activist like that is somebody who feels they need to go change the world. It just has something in it that is going to automatically be collectivist. Like if you go through Jonathan Streeter's Cultural Revolution videos or stuff that happened in Russia, there was these activated people, these people who were put up. Sometimes in China, they said they wanted to activate the scum of the earth. They really said that, like, we're going to use the scum. We're going to make them activists for us. And then they also activated young kids. They activated a lot of people don't understand that the Red Guard were.
Yeah, the Bolsheviks were that's where the term useful idiots comes from.
Yeah. And going back to Benson, I got in a little bit of back and forth with a guy about it because I said that thing in the video, but listen to that trigonometry video about what happened and how many people died and how many people knew people who died and how much poverty there was in Soviet Russia, and realize that Benson had firsthand living knowledge of it. Mm-hmm. He went and spent time there in a dying village, had been through some sort of gulag, you know, mm-hmm. and a lot of them didn't survive. And then the numbers of the people who died, and then the numbers of the people who they died in all sorts of different ways, sometimes being in the gulag, sometimes being executed. Sometimes there was like certain situations where there was these situations in Poland where the Russians got there to save like a Polish town from the Nazis, but they saw that the Nazis were killing all the people. And so the Russians just decided, let's hold back till they finish killing those people. And then like they purposefully did that. And the English knew that they had done that. They knew they'd done that on multiple different times in multiple different towns. And they were just their materialist world made them not value human life in any way, shape, or form. Yep. And Benson had firsthand knowledge of all of this. Firsthand in the cabinet of the United States of America. But beyond that, he went and spent time there at the peak height of this stuff. And so then he gets a bit nervous and spazzy when these people start slipping it into everywhere, and it did get slipping everywhere. That's the thing that the lying that I can't stand that people do about it, or the sand thrown in the eyes, is everybody wants to pretend like it just wasn't true at all.
Yeah.
There's so much about, like, listen to Razor Fist, he's another YouTuber, talk about the McCarthy trials. There's always this stuff reframing about Hollywood that sure, they went overboard, and I'm somebody who's super anti going overboard, because just like we always talk about, these Antifa types, they want to find anybody they can consider a Nazi and punch the Nazis. I agree that getting a little bit sloppy with being who you're ready to accuse with it, and we're sitting here saying this guy's probably obviously a commie, but at the same time too, I wouldn't say, just like I said, don't have them at the school, all this stuff. Like, we're arguing for, like, put up a different position up there or something like that. We're not saying go throw him in a gulag or go punch him or something.
No.
And that's what
I think
the opposite side says. But Benson was a bit over exuberant, and this is the fact of the matter. I bet you in most of the cases, because a lot of stuff's coming out right now about the Eisenhower administration, that it was infiltrated by the KGB, and other people got wild and ran off with it and all that sorts of stuff. But the truth of it is that it's a huge threat, and Benson was always right that it was a huge threat, even if it was sneaking in. That trigonometry video, man, I mean, I've known that stuff too, because there's a lot of different areas. I've been in arguments with commies going way back, and they'll try to give you arguments that Solzhenitsyn was a fascist, and his wife even said he was a fascist, and they'll try to say stuff like, no, China's population went up in the census during that time frame and things like that, and you're like, China, dude, China, like, Mao's China. Like, your numbers. This guy talks about, one reason this guy's good is because he's reporting from somebody who lived within and interviewed and talked to people inside Russia, and he came up with the numbers, talking like almost everybody he knew who lived in the time frame, 1 in 6 of them knew somebody very personal thrown into those gulags. And that's some of the same ways they get the same numbers from the Chinese, is they have to find it, because you can't get official numbers from the government.
And like, that's what's so frustrating about about the authoritarianism that's going on right now, just like it always has. It's like, yeah, they're not burning books literally, because they don't do that anymore, but there are, all the tech stuff. I mean, gosh, look what they did yesterday or 2 days ago with the nuking the Twitter account that's following after the Ghislaine Maxwell case and all that stuff. It's like, it's unreal, man.
Yeah,
like
and they used
hiding all the information from people, and
they use the same phrase on Twitter of why they can censor anybody now. Is the same phrase that I say John DeLynn always uses, the cause harm. Use the cause harm phrase, and then you get the full authoritarian power. If we mention they might cause harm with their stupid policies or something like that, that doesn't count.
Well, that's like all China stuff, man. Like, we're gonna get rid of anything that is gonna do harm to your to your allegiance to your allegiance to the party.
That's one of the things that we should get into, is just how we imagine this stuff's going to play out, because that's also part of what's dropped. The words that are dropped and all this that you and I pick out is words that align with the way that it's really going to, that we see it playing out. And it's not just that they reference like kind of like old commie stuff from the 60s or old critical theory type stuff from the 60s. It's also that they're talking about this, they drop these words from this new technocratic future planners. Like, I don't even want to say the words, because that will really get us flagged. But I mean, we mentioned it, and he says it in like resetting your
moral reset.
And they drop these words that let you know that they're on board with how this stuff is really playing out. And somebody else that everybody should kind of get into and look at what he said about it is Michael Breckenwald, because he kind of does a good job of melding the two things together, the corporate and the state, which is Mussolini's definition of fascism. But it's kind of what China does, meld the corporate, meld the state together.
Yep.
But
Well,
the way this,
that's who's in control here now.
yeah,
And that's China loves it. They don't give, like, they won't say that they're capitalist, but they'll say we like our version of capitalism.
yeah, where we let the capitalism go, but it's not like a true free market, because any single moment we can kind of come in and take over.
And it's kind of a Mott and Bailey,
yeah,
defense.
but they also kind of know they have to do it a little bit, because the pure communism kills Holodomor's people, like happened in Russia, or the famines in China.
Yeah.
So they've integrated new ways. So kind of when we're talking about these people are Marxists or communists, we don't think, and nobody should think, that how it's going to play out is the way exactly how just some marching Red Guard did in Russia, or some takeover in Cuba. It's got its new techno mode of going, and that's what we're afraid of. And
right,
guys like this, it almost kind of seems like they're just helping prep the way, they're helping prime the way, they're a cog in the machine of it.
Yeah. I mean, everything's so much more sophisticated than it used to be, but that's a big theme that Orwell talks about in 1984. Is, I mean, what was Winston's job? He worked for the Newspeak dictionary, changing definitions of words, and they kept coming out with new volumes.
Yeah, memory hole and stuff.
And memory hole stuff, and reduce things into kind of reduce meanings into
the ministry of truth.
Yes. It's like that's the thing. The discourse has to continue to keep going forward. People are out there, and there are people who think about these things, and who try to see things as they are. You know what I mean? It's definitely hard to pay attention to all this stuff. It's actually hard to understand, the different cogs of how the world works. But also, when you start seeing it going to crap, and it's like, holy crap, you know what I mean? But there are the thing that does give me hope, and I really do think that at the end of it all is that there are good people out there, who really want to do good in the world.
Yeah. And just to bring that all the way back around, but to bring it all the way around to what we're talking about here, is a liberation theologist by the name, I'm trying to find his name here real quick. Oh, here it is. I'll pull up the screen here. Liberation. And this guy, I think Kevin's assessment is right. If we call him common, if we call him far left, if we call him progressive, all those terms don't even matter. You can just use the word liberation theologist. That's good enough. Liberation theology goes beyond just saying it was a crucial moment in his life. He said something like the guy is like his spiritual advisor, this
Helder Kamara.
Yep. And he was with that same other guy I mentioned before, but he's Brazilian, but it's coming out of Latin America, and this is going back to the 60s. And part of what pushes along this whole world is liberation theology. And what came out of Catholicism, and it also got picked up by Southern Baptist types and that sort of thing, like James Cone. And those liberation theology is a good enough term to say it's collectivist, oppressor, oppressed stuff. It might be more on the level of vulgar Marxism. I saw the guy who wrote Tabernacles of Clay made some sort of claim that Glenn Beck turned everybody against liberation theology or something, because it made everybody think that it just had to do with Southern Baptist blacks or something like that, and our racism is what made us hate it. And I remember when I read it, I'm like, at that moment I hadn't even read very much about the black liberation theologists, and I knew they existed, but I'm like, what is he talking about? Like, liberation theology is, to me, is this Catholic movement, but it did go into that sort of area. But this guy making that claim was the guy who wrote Tabernacles of Clay. He's an ex-Mormon. Like, Tabernacles of Clay is supposedly like an LGBT Mormon critique, a critique of Mormonism. I just think that guy's just a bozo, just who doesn't even really understand what liberation theology is, but he's just kind of trying to inoculate people hearing. Like if somebody hears us talk about liberation theology, we are just Glenn Beck loving idiots. You know?
Yeah. Yep, we've been gaslit.
Yep. Right on.
Sweet. Well,
Liberation theology sucks.
mhm.
Don't let Mormonism become it.
Yep.
It will be sucky.
Yep.
What a
It will
day.
be.
What a day. What a day.
What a day. Yep.
Right on, man.
All right. Peace out.
Bye.